Learn about a special angel's battle against cancer and what her family is now doing to help others. Coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on the Shelley Glasspell-Sheilard Ewing Sarcoma Fund, and we're visiting with Karen Hogan. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All week it's been so exciting to see so much that's gone into the fund and making it an exciting one, and surely to know that it's at such a germinal stage now, the opportunity to grow it and to have an even bigger impact on helping folks who've struggled and are struggling, or whose families have struggled with the Ewing sarcoma. It's a really big deal. Are you originally from the area, Karen?
No, I'm originally from Asheboro, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And I right now live in Shelby, North Carolina.
Okay. And where'd you attend school?
I went to UNC, or University of North Carolina at Greensboro, to get my bachelor's degree in nursing. And then I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and received my master's degree in nursing and my family nurse practitioner certification.
Great. What did you do after graduation?
I found a job in the Gastonia, Shelby area, and I moved in that direction. And I've been living there ever since, which has been about 7 to 8 years. Okay.
You said you got your master's in family nurse practitioner.
Yes.
What exactly is that?
A family nurse practitioner is an RN who has extra training and education to see patients and diagnose illnesses, prescribe medications. If you've heard of a physician's assistant, it's like a physician's assistant. We do many of the same things, and we work under the authority of a doctor who is there where we can consult them if we need to for any particular problems that we do not have the knowledge to handle by ourselves.
Karen, how old were you when you were diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma?
I was diagnosed in January of 2002, and at that time I was 37.
Okay, wow. Did your medical background help you in dealing with this cancer?
It did in some respects. I think it helped me to deal with day-to-day like side effects of treatment. It helped me to know what to expect a little more from the treatment. But as far as helping me to deal with Ewing sarcoma specifically, I did not have a lot of knowledge about Ewing sarcoma. I'm in family practice, so that's not something that I have dealt with a lot. And I did not remember much of what I learned in school about Ewing sarcoma because I haven't used it. So anyway, it did not help me to know about Ewing sarcoma and to be able to feel any better about it. Then when I used my knowledge to know where to go to look things up, the things that I would read about Ewing sarcoma were not that positive. And I think my medical background at that time was a crutch because it made me be a little less positive at the time, I believe.
Really scared.
Yes, yes.
I think Sandy talked about it on Monday, it being a pediatric disease for the most part, and
mostly.
Really focusing on...
Yes, mostly it is. It's pediatric and very young adult. It's not unusual in your 20s, but once you get past 30 and on up, it gets more unusual, but it's not unheard of. So that's a little more difficult, too, to deal with it as an adult, because most of the information you find on Ewing sarcoma deals with children.
Jay Bultz will be coming in a couple minutes, who was afflicted in his late teens and obviously has gotten through it, and just like yourself, been very blessed. When did you first meet Shelley Glasspell-Sheilard?
I met her during one of my hospitalizations for chemotherapy. I believe before she came to see me, she called me on the phone before I went into the hospital. And she explained to me who she was and why she was calling me, and then she asked me if I would mind if she came to visit me. So when I was in the hospital that week for chemotherapy, she came to see me, and I think she brought me a gift, and then she brought me a bag of hats and scarves that she had worn when her hair came out. So she brought those to me, and she was very helpful to me at the time because I had no other contact with anybody who had this.
Right, particularly when you think about it being a disease that primarily afflicts children.
Right.
Probably not a lot of folks in the hospital or the cancer center, wherever you were.
Those
visits from Shelley were probably as meaningful as any.
Yes, much more meaningful because it's so nice to have someone to talk to that knows what you're going through and that you can talk to about things that I had not been through yet that she had been through. So that was very helpful to me.
When you think of lasting impressions that those impacts starting back a little more than a year ago had on your life, if you can encapsulate the impression you have from those experiences, how would you sum it up?
I think the biggest impression that I had from Shelley's visits to me was the kind of person Shelley was. Shelley was so concerned about other people. I remember when she first started seeing me, she was still dealing with her own cancer. She was getting to the end, I think, of her treatments, and so she was still having to deal with that, but yet she was so interested in making sure that I was okay. And I remember when she had a relapse of her cancer, she was so concerned about even telling me about it because she was concerned about how it would affect me. And she was so unselfish in that way that's the big thing that I can remember.
Boy, Karen, that's powerful. Obviously, since her passing, you've been in contact with her family. Part of the reason helped get you in touch with the Ewing Sarcoma Fund. Who got in touch with you first?
Actually, I first heard about the Ewing Sarcoma Fund from the nurse at our oncology office because Sandy is in touch with them. And Shelley's mother, Sandy, had told the nurse at the office that she was doing this fund and all the work that she was having to do. And so the nurse told me about it, and when Sandy called me, I asked her about it, and then she started telling me about all the work that she was doing for this fund, and I thought it was such a wonderful thing because I've seen that there is a need for support groups, for more information on Ewing sarcoma, especially for adults.
Wow. Karen, we've got about a minute. How are you doing now? Have you been able to return to work?
I have a release to return to work, and I am now looking for a job. So I'm so happy to be able to look for a job. So that's what I'm doing at the present time.
That's fantastic. Well, we wish you luck. If you have one message to send to families dealing with Ewing sarcoma, what do you think that message would be?
The biggest message that I can think of is to stay positive and not to give up hope. A lot of the information is very discouraging, and find supportive people, support groups. I found great support from my church in dealing with this and staying positive in so many other ways besides just when you think about Ewing sarcoma, there's not a lot of positive things that comes to mind. But in your life, if you can spend time doing things that make you happy and spending time with people who are supportive, that really helps.
Find people who are supportive. Hear the words of Karen Hogan. She's come through, and you can as well. Thank you, Karen, for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Jay Bultz coming up next. Good morning. Welcome back to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on the Shelley Sheelard Ewing Sarcoma Fund. And we're visiting with J. Marcus Bultz, a local attorney at law. Good morning, Jay.
Morning.
Thanks so much for getting back in. It's so exciting to think just a couple of months ago, Jay, we were sitting in these same two seats focused on Camp Happy Days, and you came in with Flash. I think you were, what, Captain Ahab?
Yes, that's right.
And to see the two of you all in.
My camp nickname.
That's exactly right. To think about kicking that off, and then a couple of weeks later, actually being at Camp Happy Days for the entire week leading up to right after July 4th. All the amazing things happening out there at Camp Happy Days. And now to get back around and actually have a chance to talk to you about the cancer that had a great impact on your life and has affected you even 30 years later. Thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure, Greg.
For viewers who may not have caught you that time we were here in the studio a couple months ago, are you originally from the area, Jay?
Yeah, I'm an original native of Myrtle Beach. I grew up here, went to school here, and then off to Carolina, undergrad, and then traveled around for a while and went back to school, law school in New Orleans, and then returned home in 1984 and been practicing law here in Myrtle Beach ever since.
Do you still have family in the area, Jay?
Most of my family is scattered about. My mother's still here. My brothers and sisters are spread across the country, and I have two beautiful children here, Monty and Mark. And, so that's brief history.
What prompted you to pursue a law degree, Jay, almost 20 years ago?
I enjoy working with people, and I enjoy problem solving and helping people. I've always been involved in various organizations, charity organizations, and civic groups, and I just saw it as an opportunity to help people. And the practice of law encompasses so many other different disciplines in life, and I just enjoy, that broad spectrum of experience that you get to share working as a lawyer.
And you said you opened your practice here in '84, and you've stayed here in Horry County the entire almost 20 years now.
Yeah. I actually started working for legal aid, and then within about a year and a half, 2 years, I went out on my own. And I've had some associations with a couple other firms, but primarily I've been practicing on my own.
Jay, my grandmother practiced law for almost a little more than 70 years in North Carolina. She always called the legal profession a gentleman's education. Just studying law was a good gentleman's education. Of course, she wasn't a gentleman, but her son and husband and father were all attorneys. And
70 years is a long time. That's
she
pretty
practiced
incredible.
From 1920 to 1991. Yeah, she had an amazing career. But the practice of law is truly an ability to help others.
It is. It really is. And also, about 10 years ago, I got exposed to mediation, alternative dispute resolution, and I just saw that as a better way to go than litigation. Now, if people need to go to court, that's fine, we can do that, but I have since gone on to get the training as a mediator. I'm certified in family court and circuit court and federal court, and I do a lot of mediation. In fact, that's just about taken over my practice these days, and a lot of people are realizing that's a better way to go. It's much more cost effective. It doesn't create the animosity that litigation does, and you can get matters resolved very quickly. As opposed to years in court, it can be done in a matter of days or weeks.
That's fascinating, Jay. For viewers who may not be familiar with alternative dispute resolution or mediation, are those the same thing? And what exactly, how does one get started?
Alternative dispute resolution encompasses mediation, which is working with opposing parties, trying to bring them together to some sort of resolution. Involves some negotiation, but primarily a dialogue to see if they can't reach some common ground. Arbitration is different in that you sit basically as a judge and you make a decision that becomes a binding decision, just as if a judge had made a decision and it's actually filed in court. I do a lot of that as well. Sometimes I am appointed special referee by judges who are conflicted out in a case. If they have some relationship with the parties or whatever, then they will assign the case to me as special referee, and again I sit as an actual judge. And then there's other types of alternative dispute resolution, but those are the two most common types.
That's fascinating, Jay, and that becomes binding.
Yes, it does.
So you really do act almost as a judge in those instances.
And again, it has lots of benefits to it, cost benefits, time benefits, and that you can get a case resolved quickly and efficiently, as opposed to waiting for the case to come up on the docket, which it typically takes 1.5 to 2 years in our circuit courts.
Jay, that's fascinating. You talked about this. You're able to do this in family court, circuit court, and in federal court. How often does it take effect in federal court, for instance?
Well, as soon as you render a decision, you file it. And I also serve as arbitrator in other fashions, such as for the Better Business Bureau. I'm one of their certified arbitrators and handle automobile lemon cases. And so I get those cases assigned to me on a regular basis. I'm one of about 2 in this area that do that.
And you say you get those cases assigned to you. Is someone able to say, "Hey, I want Jay Bultz to arbitrate"?
Yeah, we get phone calls all the time. People calling in and say, we're going through a divorce or separation, and rather than hire attorneys and go to court, we want to sit down with a mediator. And the result comes out in a mediated agreement, a written agreement, which they can take to court and finalize their separation or divorce.
Why doesn't everyone do that, Jay?
I guess the public is not completely aware of it yet. It's still kind of new, and there's, I guess, not a whole lot of public awareness yet, but it's changing. People are starting to become aware of it.
Well, obviously, this week is focused on the Shelley Glasfeld-Shieler Ewing Sarcoma Fund. But we, sitting here talking to you makes me think we really need to do a week focused on mediation and arbitration or alternative dispute resolution.
That's a
so
story
exciting.
for another time, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jay, when you think about a rare disease that affects primarily a pediatric disease in this instance, Ewing sarcoma, this obviously has had an impact on adults. You're now an adult. You were afflicted when you were in your late teens. Can you share with the viewers real quick about Ewing sarcoma and if it had a different name back then?
When I was 19, I was diagnosed with what they called it then was osteogenic sarcoma, which I think is the primary diagnosis. Later on, they attached the name Ewing's sarcoma to it. There's different classifications, but it all relates to bone cancer, osteo being bone. And the nickname for it when I was diagnosed was athlete's tumor, because a lot of athletes ended up suffering from this. In fact, there was a famous runner in Canada called Terry Fox. They made a movie out of his life called The Terry Fox Story. He had the exact same thing I did, and unfortunately he did not live. Also, Ted Kennedy's son, Teddy Kennedy, or maybe, I can't remember, I guess it was Teddy Kennedy. His son had the exact same thing, and he was in the hospital at the same time I was. I was diagnosed with cancer in 1972, bone cancer, osteogenic sarcoma. And back then, it basically was a death sentence. Well, it still is today. Osteosarcoma, as I understand it, is the second deadliest cancer next to leukemia. And I was fortunately sent off to an experimental program up in Pittsburgh in which they did not use the chemo, they did not use the radiation. I didn't have to undergo any of that. What they did is they amputated my left leg. The tumor developed in my knee, which is one of the most common places for this type of cancer to hit, sometimes in the elbows, but mostly in knee joints and other parts of longer bones in your body. And in this program, what they did, other than the amputation, was to take parts of the tumor and out of me and rework it and inject it back into me as if you were creating like an antivenom, the same fashion in which they would take snake venom to turn into antivenom to get your immune system to then fight the cancer cells. And so when I was in this program, there were 14 other young people my age going through this program, and only 2 of us lived. When I was diagnosed, they told me that I had 1.5 years to live at the most, that only 15% of those diagnosed with this would live. And so obviously that had a huge effect on my life.
Jay, you were a teenager.
It changed my life, yes. I lived life as if there was no tomorrow, because I no longer had any concern to be afraid of anything, because I already had my death sentence. I knew I was going to die. And so it had a profound effect on who I was and the decisions that I made in life and my, well, I didn't make any plans for life. I just kind of lived day by day. Just sort of lived for the moment. And then after a number of years passed, a doctor down in New Orleans that I've become friendly with, a well-known orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Robert D'Ambrosia, at Tulane in New Orleans, eventually one day told me, he said, look, you don't need to worry about this anymore. Your time has passed. Your chances of getting more cancer are the same as anybody else's. And at that point, I thought, well, gee, maybe I can have a life. Maybe I can plan for the future. And then went back to school, went to law school, and you know, the rest is history. I'm here today, thank goodness.
That is fascinating, Jay. But just to think about it, being a teenager and being given, of course, being at Camp Happy Days and thinking about so many of the children there who don't think they'll be back the next year, who are living kind of like that. I mean, you know, of course, we're told to live each day as if it's your last anyway, and so that's probably...
You know, that's actually gave me an advantage in life because of that type of experience. People who have a life-threatening disease or a chronic disease or a terrible accident have choices to make. Choices that they make unconsciously, or maybe it's made for them by fate. And it's kind of like that old game show, you have 3 doors to choose from. You know, you can choose door number 1, that is a life of despair and misery. Oh, woe is me. You know, my life has come to an end. Or maybe you can choose door number 3 over here that, you know, well, I'll just simply accept the fact that I'm crippled or I'm handicapped or I can no longer do anything and I'll just sit back and do nothing with my life. Or you can choose that door in the middle that creates a new life for you. There is something that has been described as the will to live. It's different from a desire to live. A desire to live is, I hope that I live to see my children graduate from school or get married or whatever. That is a conscious decision. But the will to live is something innate in our bodies. It's cellular almost. And this is an opportunity to bring that out and to overcome and to transform your life. There is a shift in your life, a shift in focus in your life. And what that does is create a new perspective as to what is important in your life and the focus of your life. You know, people may think that the purpose of life is to achieve something, to become a doctor or become a lawyer, or to become successful or famous, and that becomes a very limited focus. Whereas going through an experience like this, if you choose that particular door or it's chosen for you, for instance, with me, it was just something that just kind of came up in me. I didn't make that conscious decision. It just sort of happened in me naturally to make that decision, to have an expanded view of life and to have a different appreciation of life and things in life that most people don't appreciate. And in one respect, that gives me an advantage over people who haven't had that sort of suffering or experience. It gives me a strength in life that other people don't have because I have that perspective now. There is a doctor out in California, Dr. Rachel Remond, who heads up a program that focuses in on that aspect. She takes a holistic approach. She's a medical doctor who has had Crohn's disease throughout most of her life. And this is what she tries to work with people to try and bring out that will to live, to become in touch with that will to live, so that people don't take this door or that door that leads to despair or just simply, blind acceptance. It is the door to a new awakening, a new perspective. And that creates another strength that helps people to survive and helps people to cope. And it takes away their fears in life. You no longer have the fear of what people may think of you. You no longer have the fear of taking risks because you end up with the only fear is not living your life, not being in touch with your life. And that's a profound experience.
That must be, Jay. I've got to ask one last question. We've got to wrap up so that we don't run out of time. But if you had a message to give patients and their families who are battling with cancer, Ewing sarcoma cancer in this instance, but really any cancer, what would that message be?
to choose that middle door, to choose that door to take an expanded view of what is happening to you. Don't take the door of, the despair and darkness. Don't take the door of just, giving up and the acceptance. Allow this to change your life. Take the expanded view. And it gives you such opportunities to understand life and to be in touch with life. It's an opportunity. Don't lose that opportunity. See it as an opportunity. Grab that opportunity, because not only will it change your perspective on life, if that will to live comes out, that's how you survive.
That's wonderful, Jay. And that's a powerful message, whether it's to you directly as a cancer survivor, as someone who's battling cancer now, a family member who's going through it, to help support another one. This is a life. It is a door to another life. Take the opportunity now to live it strong. Thank you, Jay Bultz.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. We want to thank Karen Hogan and Jay Bultz for making today's Carolina People so special.